The bear was crying out for help, but when the man discovered the reason, he was left frozen in terror deep in the wilderness of Yosemite National Park. A seasoned park ranger encountered something that stopped him in his tracks. A massive grizzly bear, not as a predator, but as a desperate mother, pleading for help. With every moment counting and a hidden danger lurking, what he discovered next was nothing short of astonishing. Stay with us as we unravel a story of courage, compassion, and an unbreakable bond between a man and the wild. Before we dive in, if you enjoy stories that inspire and move you, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Your support helps us bring more incredible tales to life. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain of Yosemite National Park. John, a seasoned park ranger with a weathered face that mirrored the landscape, traversed the winding trail with the familiar scent of pine needles and damp earth filled his nostrils, providing a comforting aroma that always seemed to ground him, reminding him of his place in nature. He had spent the better part of 2 decades patrolling the trails, each bend and vista etched into his memory. He knew the park like the back of his hand, and it whispered secrets to him through the rustling leaves, babbling brooks, and calls of the wild. John was not just a ranger, he was a guardian, a silent observer of the delicate balance between man and nature. Today, however, the tranquility of the wilderness was pierced by an unfamiliar sound. It was not the chirping of birds or the rustling of squirrels, but a low, guttural moan that seemed to echo through the very trees. John paused, his senses heightened, his hand instinctively reaching for the radio clipped to his belt. He scanned the surroundings, his eyes searching for the source of the strange sound. The forest held its breath, the usual symphony of nature hushed, as if in anticipation. Then he saw it. A figure emerged from the thick undergrowth, lumbering towards him with a labored gait. It was a bear, a magnificent specimen of a grizzly, but something was amiss. The bear's imposing presence was replaced with an air of vulnerability. Its fur, usually sleek and glossy, was matted and dusty. Its movements, usually fluid and powerful, were slow and hesitant. And then there were its eyes. Those deep-set, intelligent eyes that usually held a spark of wildness were now filled with a desperate plea, a silent cry for help. John's heart pounded in his chest. He'd encountered bears countless times in his career, but he'd never witnessed such raw emotion in their eyes. He knew this was no ordinary encounter. Something was deeply wrong. As the bear drew closer, John noticed a dark stain on its flank, a crimson blotch against the brown fur. As the bear slowly turned, JN noticed a deep gash on its side. The wound was raw and inflamed, clearly causing the animal immense pain. A wave of empathy washed over him, and he realized that he was not just looking at an injured animal. He was witnessing a creature in dire need, with its life hanging in the balance. He knew he had to act and offer aid to this majestic creature that had crossed the boundary between wildness and vulnerability. He spoke softly, his voice a calming presence in the stillness of the forest. "Easy there, fella," he murmured, taking a slow, deliberate step forward. The bear lowered itself to the ground, its massive head resting on its paws. It whimpered softly, a sound that tugged at John's heartstrings. He knelt beside it, his movements gentle and reassuring. He reached out, hesitant at first, then firm, as he examined the wound. The gash was deep, the flesh torn and infected. John winced. Imagining the pain that the bear must be experiencing, he knew that he couldn't treat such a severe injury in the field. He needed to get the bear to the park's veterinary clinic as soon as possible. But how to tranquilize a bear of that size in its weakened state was risky. The terrain was rough, the journey back to the trailhead long and arduous, and there was also the question of the bear cubs. JN noticed the swollen teeth, a clear indication that this was the mother. Where were her young? Were they safe? The weight of responsibility settled on JN's shoulders. He wasn't just dealing with an injured animal, he was dealing with the mother's life, the family's fate. He looked into the bear's eyes, those pools of pain and desperation, and made a silent vow that he would help the bear no matter what the cost. The fading light cast an ethereal glow over the clearing, painting the towering pines in shades of purple and gray. JN's mind, racing, assessed the situation. He knew he couldn't move the bear alone. She was far too large, and her injury was too severe. He needed backup, and needed it fast. Reaching for his radio, he contacted headquarters. His voice was steady, despite the urgency of the situation. Ranger Station, this is Ranger John, requesting immediate assistance. I have an adult grizzly with a severe laceration. The location is approximately 2 miles south of Eagle Peak Trailhead, requesting veterinary support and a transport team. The response was swift and reassuring. Copy that. Ranger John, we're dispatching a team. ETA approximately 1 hour. Maintain visual contact with the bear, but do not approach or engage. Prioritize your safety. John acknowledged the instructions. A sense of relief washed over him. Help was on the way, but the next hour stretched before him like an eternity. He had to keep the bear calm, prevent her from wandering off, or worse, succumbing to her injuries. He spoke to her in a low, soothing voice, the kind of voice he used to calm wild animals. John, a young man, tried to calm the frightened bear. He kept a safe distance and maintained eye contact, trying to show that help was coming. The bear's breathing was labored, but she seemed to understand. She lay still, her eyes fixed on John. There was a flicker of trust in her eyes. John rummaged through his backpack, hoping to find something to comfort the bear. He found a half-full bottle of water. Approaching cautiously, he extended the bottle towards the bear. She watched him intently, her nostrils twitching as she picked up his scent. With a hesitant movement, she reached out and gently took the bottle from John's hand. She lapped at the water gratefully, offering some relief from her pain and dehydration. As the minutes passed, John kept vigilant watch over the bear, his senses alert for any changes in her condition. She was close to fainting, her breathing shallow and tremors running through her massive body. He knew she was weakening, struggling to fight off the infection and exhaustion. He thought about her cubs, where they were, hidden in the undergrowth, waiting for their mother to return, or lost and vulnerable. The thought of them helpless and alone filled him with urgency. He had to find them, reunite them with their mother. But first he had to ensure Hope's survival. He talked to her, telling her stories, trying to keep her awake and conscious. As twilight deepened, casting long shadows across the forest floor, he heard the distant thrum of a helicopter. His heart leaped with hope. Help had arrived. He grabbed his flashlight, signaling the approaching aircraft, guiding them towards the clearing. The helicopter landed in a whirlwind of dust and leaves, its powerful searchlight illuminating the scene. A team of park rangers and veterinarians rushed towards John, their faces etched with concern. "How is she?" Sarah, the park vet, asked. Her voice filled with urgency. "Weak but stable," JN replied, stepping aside to allow Sarah to examine the bear. Sarah worked quickly, assessing the wound, administering antibiotics and fluids. The bear, exhausted and in pain, submitted to the treatment. Her eyes flickered between JN and Sarah, a glimmer of gratitude in their depths. With the bear stabilized, the team carefully loaded her onto a stretcher, preparing to airlift her to the park's veterinary clinic. As they lifted her into the helicopter, John felt a pang of sadness, a sense of separation. From this creature, he had come to care deeply but he knew that this was the best chance for its survival. He watched the helicopter disappear into the night sky, carrying Hope towards safety. He knew his work wasn't over. He had a promise to keep, a family to reunite. He turned towards the darkening forest, his resolve strengthened. He would find those cubs. Dawn broke, painting the sky with hues of rose and gold, casting a soft light over the wilderness. John, fueled by a strong cup of coffee and a renewed sense of purpose, set out to find Hope's cubs. He knew they couldn't be far from where he'd encountered their mother, their survival instincts likely keeping them close to their last known point of contact with her. He retraced his steps, his eyes scanning the forest floor for any sign of the cubs' tracks, scat, even a disturbed patch of leaves that might indicate their presence. He imagined them small and vulnerable, huddled together. For warmth and comfort, unaware of their mother's plight, the thought of them alone in the vast wilderness, exposed to predators and the elements, filled him with a sense of urgency. The forest, however, remained silent, its secrets well guarded. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher in the sky, casting long shadows that danced and shifted with the gentle breeze. John's initial optimism began to wane, replaced by a gnawing worry. Had the cubs wandered off? Had they fallen prey to a coyote or bobcat? He pushed those thoughts aside, refusing to give in to despair. He had to find them. He had to believe they were out there, somewhere, waiting to be reunited with their mother. He reminded himself of the resilience of nature, the inherent strength of these creatures, their ability to adapt and survive. He continued his search, venturing deeper into the wilderness, following animal trails, listening for the slightest sound, his senses on high alert. Alert, he climbed over fallen logs and waded through shallow streams, his boots sinking into the soft earth. The forest, once a place of tranquility, now seemed to hold its breath in silence, a heavy weight on his shoulders. Just as he was about to admit defeat, a faint sound reached his ears, a soft whimper, barely audible above the rustling leaves. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest, as he strained his ears, listening intently, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. Cautiously, he crept forward, his movements slow and deliberate, careful not to disturb the delicate balance of the forest. The whimpering grew louder, guiding him towards a thicket of ferns and bushes. He parted the foliage gently, his eyes widening as he spotted two cubs, no bigger than house cats, huddled together beneath a fallen log. Their fur, a rich shade of cinnamon, blended perfectly with the forest floor. Their eyes, wide and innocent, stared up at him. With a mixture of fear and curiosity, John's heart melted at the sight of the cubs. They were so small and vulnerable, yet so full of life. He knelt down slowly, extending his hand towards them. His voice was a soft whisper. "It's okay, little ones," he murmured. "I'm here to help." The cubs, wary of this human intruder, retreated, further into their hiding place. John remained patient, his movements gentle and reassuring. He spoke to them softly, telling them stories about their mother, about her strength and courage, about her love for them. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a handful of dried berries, offering them to the cubs. The cubs, driven by hunger and perhaps sensing his kindness, emerged cautiously from their hiding place, sniffing the berries tentatively, their tiny noses twitching before taking them from his hand. John smiled, his heart filled with relief. He had found them. Now he had to get them back to the clinic, to their mother, to complete the circle of care he had started. The cubs were safely located, but a new challenge arose, transporting them through the rugged terrain. John couldn't simply carry them in his arms. They were surprisingly strong, with their tiny claws sharp and their instinct to squirm ever present. He needed a plan to secure them safely while navigating the challenging landscape. John surveyed his surroundings, his eyes falling on his ranger jacket, discarded earlier in the heat of the search. An idea sparked in his mind. He carefully folded the jacket, creating a makeshift sling, and gently placed one of the cubs inside. The cub initially startled, but soon settled down as its warmth radiated through the fabric. The second cub proved more challenging. John, reluctant to leave it behind, decided to improvise. He carefully opened his backpack, creating a cozy space within, and gently placed the second cub inside, leaving the top slightly open, allowing the cub to peek out from its curious eyes. Taking in the world from its new vantage point, John secured his precious cargo. Starting the arduous journey back to the trailhead, the terrain was uneven, with rocks and fallen branches strewn across the path. He moved slowly, carefully placing each step, mindful of the delicate creatures in his care. The cubs initially whimpered with fear, but gradually settled into the rhythm of John's movement, the gentle sway of the sling, and the warmth of his body. Occasionally, a reassuring pat seemed to soothe them, and they grew quiet, their eyes widened with curiosity as they observed the world from their unique perspective. He closed his eyes, replaying the events of the day, the encounter with Hope, the search for cubs, and the challenging journey back. He felt a deep connection to these creatures and a sense of responsibility for their well-being. He knew his work was not over, so he would visit the clinic to check on their progress and ensure their safe return to the wild. He had become their guardian, their protector, a silent observer of their journey back to freedom. The veterinary clinic, a sanctuary of healing, hummed with quiet energy. After a much-needed shower and change of clothes, he made his way to the observation room, overlooking the bear enclosure. He felt a mix of anticipation and trepidation, eager to witness the reunion between Hope and her cubs, yet apprehensive about their condition. Sarah, the veterinarian, greeted him with a warm smile. "John, you're just in time," she said, leading him towards the window. Hope's eyes met his, and he felt a rush of relief. They were healthy and strong, ready to take on the world. Together they watched as the cubs played and explored their new home, knowing that they were safe and loved. John had been feeling quite restless, sensing that his cubs were near. He peered into the enclosure, his heart swelling with emotion and hope. He saw that their wounds had been cleaned and bandaged, and they lay on a bed of soft straw. Their eyes were filled with a longing that mirrored his own. The cubs, nestled in a separate enclosure nearby, whimpered softly, their tiny paws reaching out towards their mother. The moment of reunion was magical, as John carefully introduced the cubs into the enclosure. Hope's demeanor transformed. She rose to her feet, her maternal instincts taking over. Her eyes softened with a tender love as she enveloped the cubs in a warm embrace. Her deep purrs resonated through the room, and the cubs nuzzled against her, their tiny bodies wiggling with excitement. Their whimpers were replaced with contented sounds. John watched the scene, his own eyes welling up with tears. With tears. In his eyes, John had witnessed the raw power of nature and the unbreakable bond between a mother bear and her cubs. He was amazed by the resilience of life in the face of adversity. Over the next few days, he became a regular at the clinic, spending hours observing the bears and studying their interactions. He marveled at their resilience as he learned to distinguish between the cubs, their personalities as unique as their physical markings. Scout, the bolder of the two, was always exploring and venturing further from his mother's side, his curiosity insatiable. Willow, the more cautious one, preferred to stay close by, with wonder in her eyes as she watched her brother's adventures. John's presence seemed to have a calming effect on the bears, and Hope, initially wary of humans, grew to trust him. She would often approach the edge of the enclosure, allowing John to gently scratch behind her ears. The cubs also seemed to enjoy his company, their playful antics often directed at him. John found himself drawn to the bears' resilience and their ability to overcome challenges, to adapt and thrive despite the trauma they had endured. He saw in them a reflection of the wilderness itself, its ability to heal, to regenerate, to endure. He felt a deep connection to these creatures, a sense of shared experience that transcended language. One afternoon, as John sat observing the bears, Sarah approached him with a thoughtful expression. "We're planning to release Hope and his cubs back into the wild soon," she began. "We're looking for someone to monitor their progress, to ensure they're adapting well. Someone who understands their needs, their connection to this place. Junk's heart leapt at the offer. "I'd be honored," he replied, his voice filled with sincerity. The prospect of being involved in their return to the wild filled him with a sense of purpose. He felt a responsibility towards these bears, a desire to protect them, to ensure their successful reintegration into their natural habitat. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to do everything in his power to help them thrive. John immersed himself in preparations leading up to the release. He studied maps of the release site, consulted with wildlife experts, and familiarized himself with each bear's individual needs. He felt a sense of responsibility, a weight on his shoulders, but also a deep sense of purpose. The chosen location was a secluded valley, nestled deep within the park, far from human settlements and disturbances. It was a pristine wilderness teeming with life, a perfect habitat for a family of bears seeking a fresh start. JN visited the site several times, scouting the terrain, identifying potential food sources, and ensuring the absence of any threats. He also spent countless hours with the cubs, observing their behavior, learning their individual quirks, and strengthening the bond he had formed with them. He talked to them, sharing stories of the wilderness, preparing them for the challenges ahead. The day of the bears' release brought a mix of excitement and apprehension. John, Sarah, and a team of park rangers accompanied the bears to the release site. The journey was filled with quiet anticipation, a sense of shared purpose, and deep respect for the animals they were entrusted with. As the transport trailer's doors opened, Hope emerged cautiously, with the cubs trailing behind their mother. They paused for a moment, taking in the sights and smells of their new home. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. The sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. With a sudden burst of energy, Hope led the cubs into the undergrowth, disappearing into the dense foliage. John watched them go, a bittersweet feeling washing over him. He had grown attached to the bears, and the thought of saying goodbye was difficult, but he knew it was the right thing to do. These bears belonged in the wild, living free. His role has shifted from caregiver to guardian, and he now monitors their progress, ensuring their successful adaptation to their new environment. He is their silent protector, a watchful presence in the shadows, intervening only when necessary. He has set up a remote observation post equipped with binoculars and a camera, allowing him to track their movements without disturbing their natural behavior. He spends hours each day observing them, documenting their interactions, their hunting techniques, and their playful explorations. He witnesses their remarkable resilience and ability to adapt and thrive in the wilderness. As a skilled hunter and protector, he teaches his cubs the ways of the wild. The cubs, quick learners, thrive under his guidance. They learn to fish in crystal-clear streams, forage for berries in sun-drenched meadows, and climb trees with the agility of seasoned climbers. John watches them flourish, with a heart swelling with pride. He felt a deep connection to these creatures, a sense of shared purpose in protecting their freedom. He was no longer just a park ranger. He was the guardian of the valley, the protector of Hope and her cubs. As summer gave way to autumn, painting the valley in a breathtaking tapestry of golds, reds, and browns, the air grew crisp, carrying the scent of decaying leaves and damp earth. Hope and her cubs, now almost fully grown, had thrived in their wild haven. John, observing them from his hidden post, marveled at their transformation. They were no longer the vulnerable creatures he had rescued. They were confident, capable predators, masters of their domain. One morning, as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the morning mist, John noticed an unusual tension in the air. The forest, usually alive with the sounds of birdsong and rustling leaves, was eerily silent. A sense of unease settled over him, a primal instinct warning him of danger. Instinct warned him of an impending disturbance. He scanned the valley with his binoculars, his eyes searching for any sign of Hope and her cubs. They were nowhere to be seen. He strained his ears, listening for any sound that might betray their presence. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the occasional gust of wind whistling through the trees. Driven by a growing sense of dread, John decided to investigate. He packed his gear, his senses on high alert, and ventured into the valley, following the faint trails left by the bears. The forest seemed to hold its breath, as the usual symphony of nature was replaced by an uneasy quiet as John ventured deeper into the wilderness. He stumbled upon a scene that made his blood run cold. A group of men, their faces obscured by camouflage paint, were setting traps and snares along the bears' frequented paths. Their movements were swift and practiced, their eyes glinting with a predatory gleam. John recognized the telltale signs of poaching, the cruel traps designed to maim and capture, the sacks filled with animal pelts and bones. A wave of anger swept over him, a fierce protectiveness for the bears he had come to care for. He knew he had to act to protect Hope and her cubs from these ruthless intruders, but he was outnumbered and outgunned. He needed backup, but contacting the rangers would take precious time the bears might not have. He decided to confront the poachers, to stall them, to buy time for the bears. He approached them cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. He spoke calmly, explaining his presence and intentions. The poachers were surprised, but they were not intimidated. They refused to leave, and John knew he would have to take action. As the minutes ticked by, John's mind raced. He had no weapon, no plan, but he knew that he could not let the poachers continue their cruel trade. He gathered his courage and charged at the poachers. In a flash, he disarmed one of them and wrestled him to the ground. The other poachers scattered, but John pursued, them determined to stop them. Finally, with the help of the rangers who had arrived just in time, John managed to subdue the poachers and secure their equipment. The bears were safe, and the poachers would face the consequences of their actions. John felt a sense of relief, but also a deep sadness for the loss of the bears' habitat and the impact of human activity on the environment. The authorities had arrived, and he stepped out from behind the thicket of trees. His voice boomed through the silent forest. "This is protected land. Leave now, or face the consequences." The poachers, startled by his sudden appearance, turned towards him with menacing glares. One of them, a burly man with a scarred face and cold eyes, sneered at John. "Who's going to stop us, old man?" he growled, his hand resting on the rifle slung across his shoulder. John stood his ground, his voice unwavering. "I am," he declared, his eyes locking with the poachers. He knew he was risking his life, but the thought of Hope and her cubs falling victim to these men fueled his courage. A tense standoff ensued. The poachers, caught off guard, hesitated. John, despite the fear gnawing at him, held his ground. His resolve strengthened by his love for the bears. He knew he had to buy time until help arrived. He engaged them in a conversation, appealing to their sense of reason, reminding them of the importance of protecting the forest and its inhabitants, of the laws they were breaking, the consequences they would face. He spoke about the beauty of the wilderness, the sanctity of life, and the importance of preserving the delicate balance of nature. His words seemed to have little effect on the hardened poachers, but they bought him precious time. In the distance, he heard the faint sound of approaching sirens. The poachers realized they were trapped and abandoned their equipment, fleeing into the dense forest. John watched them disappear, his heart pounding in his chest. He had faced danger, risked his own life to protect the bears, and fulfilled his promise, his responsibility to Hope and her cubs. As the park rangers arrived, apprehending the fleeing poachers, John returned to his observation post. He scanned the valley, his heart filled with anxiety. Where were Hope and her cubs? Had they witnessed the confrontation? Were they safe? Relief washed over him as he saw them emerge from a hidden den, their eyes wide with curiosity. Unharmed, Hope, sensing his presence, approached him. Her eyes filled with gratitude, she nuzzled him gently, a gesture of thanks from one protector to another. John, his heart filled with emotion, reached out and stroked her fur, a silent promise to continue watching over them, to ensure their safety in this wild and sometimes dangerous world. He knew their story was far from over, but he also knew they were strong, resilient, and capable of facing any challenge that came their way. Winter descended upon the valley, blanketing the landscape in a pristine layer of white. The air grew still and silent, the once vibrant forest hushed beneath the weight of snow. Hope and her cubs, their coats thick and lustrous, adapted to the changing season, their instincts guiding them through the challenges of winter survival. John, bundled in layers of warm clothing, continued his vigil, his presence a comforting constant in their lives. He tracked their movements, observing their strategies for finding food and shelter. Food and shelter in harsh conditions, he marveled at their resilience, their ability to thrive, even in the face of adversity. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a rosy glow over the snow-covered landscape, JN witnessed a scene that etched itself into his memory. Hope and her cubs nestled beside her, stood on a rocky outcrop, their silhouettes outlined against the fiery sky. They seemed to embody the very spirit of the wilderness, their strength and grace a testament to the enduring power of nature. John felt a profound sense of connection with these creatures, a kinship forged through shared experiences and mutual respect. He had witnessed their vulnerability, their resilience, and their unwavering spirit. He had played a small but significant role in their journey, a role in their return to the wild. As the days grew shorter and the nights longer, John found himself reflecting on his own life, his purpose, and his connection to the natural world. He had spent his career protecting it, the wilderness. But it was through his encounter with Hope and her cubs that he truly understood its power, its fragility. He realized that his role as a park ranger went beyond enforcing regulations and ensuring visitor safety. He was a guardian, a protector, a steward of the land and its inhabitants. He was a voice for the voiceless, a champion for the wild creatures that call this place home. Spring arrived, bringing with it a renewed sense of hope and vitality. The snow melted, revealing the vibrant greens of new life. The forest awoke from its winter slumber, its symphony of sounds filling the air once more. Hope and her cubs emerged from their den, their coats sleek and shiny, their eyes sparkling with renewed energy. They explored their familiar territory, their movements filled with newfound confidence and maturity. John watched them with pride and accomplishment. He had witnessed their transformation, their growth, their journey back to the wild. He knew they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Their spirits were strong, their instincts were sharp, and their bond was unbreakable. One day, as John sat observing the bears from his hidden post, he noticed a change in their behavior. The cubs, now almost fully independent, seemed to be preparing for a new chapter in their lives. She led them on longer excursions, teaching them advanced hunting techniques and encouraging them to explore new territories. John understood that the time had come for the cubs to venture out on their own, to establish their own territory and continue the cycle of life. He felt a pang of sadness, a sense of loss, but also a deep sense of joy. He had played his part in their journey, and now it was time for him to let go. He watched as the cubs, with a mixture of excitement, embarked on their new journey, and with trepidation, they ventured out into the wilderness, their mother's watchful eyes following their every move. He knew they would face challenges, but he also knew that they were equipped to handle them. They were wild, they were free, and they carried within them the enduring spirit of their mother, the legacy of hope. JN remained in the valley, his presence a comforting constant in the ever-changing landscape. He continued his work protecting the wilderness, ensuring the safety of its inhabitants. And so, the grizzly bear and her cubs found hope in a world where survival was never guaranteed, thanks to one man's determination to make a difference. If you enjoyed this story of courage and compassion, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell so you never miss another inspiring tale. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.